Have you ever felt like the whole world is conspiring against you and there's nothing you can do about it? That's how thousands of innocent rhinos feel every single day. As their species continues to be decimated largely due to poaching, there are many species in danger of disappearing from the world altogether. And many rhino subspecies are among them. And when animals become extinct, the ecosystems in which they live are affected. This change comes back to us as well, as we are living in the same world as these animals that are dying out. My name is Jacob Carpenter. I have studied about rhinos and rhino conservation for the last 4 years. And today I'm going to talk to you, my peers, about rhino conservation, especially focusing on northern white rhino conservation and Indian rhino conservation. I've always been one to root for the underdogs, much like individuals around the world who try to breed these animals and get them farther away from extinction. And they do this through embryo development, controlled hunting on wildlife reserves, and education programs for locals to help the conflict between the animals and people. Many of you are likely aware of traditional breeding programs that bring two members of the species together to reproduce, a practice many zoos participate in to varying degrees. However, traditional breeding methods have not proven to work at all, well, very much, with most rhino species and subspecies. Much like the Sumatran rhino, there is actually in the last 20 years have only had 2 recorded rhino calf births, period. But contrastly, northern white rhinos are actually, or southern white rhinos are actually one of the conservation marvels of the century. They've gone from 20 years ago only having 100 southern white rhinos to 20,000 in recent years. However, most subspecies of rhinos have not been that successful at reproducing and regenerating the populations that they once had. Captive breeding is not successfully preserving rhinos on a widespread scale. The majority of species and their subspecies just haven't been able to regenerate their numbers from impacts resulting from poaching, habitat loss, and the human consumption of land. Many species have actually become totally extinct, or many subspecies have totally been extinct. Much like the mainland Javan rhino, the western black rhino, and the northern white rhino, which is fundamentally extinct except for 2 very old females. The northern white rhino is responsible for one of the most unique conservation efforts for rhinos. There are many organizations that are trying to use in vitro fertilization techniques to impregnate a southern white rhino with a northern white rhino embryo. The tricky part with this is that unlike most mammals, the hormone and pheromone cycles are reversed. This meaning that the male creates the hormone which attracts the female and causes it to produce pheromones and other organic chemicals within its body to be able to have a pregnancy and keep it all the way to term. Without the male factor within IVF fertilization processes, it is hard to time the IVF cycle correctly to achieve a successful pregnancy. There are also other plans, one very promising coming from the San Diego Zoo in California. They plan to take cryo-frozen genetic epithelial tissue from different rhinos, or skin cells from different donor rhinos that have died, and to form gametes, or an egg and a sperm with them, and combining the opposites to make an embryo and then putting it into a southern white rhino. There's also been some talk to put it into a sheep, which is weird. But another rhino conservation effort that is controversial is that of controlled hunting on wildlife reserves. Many of us think that wildlife reserves are places where endangered animals are protected from hunting of any kind. But in many parks in Africa, there are occurrences where someone can buy a hunting tag from the park and use it to be able to hunt a aged male that no longer can use its genes within the breeding pool. This tag actually costs tens of thousands of dollars, which actually helps aid in the funding of those parks, and especially of rhino habitat regeneration, and also in their population gains. Controlled hunting programs help to provide a way for the organizations to stay afloat in a way that doesn't further endanger the species, provides a safe outlet for hunting of these animals, and creates an open territory for a younger male rhino to take over and thereby pass on a different group of genetic characteristics within that area. While these programs seem contradictory for conservation efforts, as a spokesman from the South African Private Rhino Owners Association said, "What pays stays." And the fact that remains is that funding is so limited, organizations are open to trying nearly anything to help protect the species as a whole instead of simply individual animals. The last conservation effort I want to highlight is one that benefits everyone involved. This is teaching the locals around wild population centers how to act around the animals and how to change their everyday lives to coexist friendly with the rhinos, with the competition between resources. In India, they are teaching the locals how to produce crops that the rhinos won't eat, and also how to fundamentally incorporate them within the conservation process. Many of this is to hold cultural events and have people come and see the animals, and also teaching them and giving them jobs to protect the animals from poachers. There are still hundreds of people who are killed by rhino encounters, as well as continual crop loss, which obviously results in negative feelings among the locals towards the animals. But these small efforts and steps are in the right direction. We all know what it feels like to be the underdog in some way or another, but this feeling of being at a disadvantage is the real daily process that these animals have to go through. In order to bring their species back to safer numbers, interventions must be made. There are several groups around the world trying to help these poor animals through way of education programs for local creation and maintenance of wildlife preserves and breeding programs in various forms. If these efforts continue to be funded and supported, someday rhinos may not feel like the world is against them, and their populations will hopefully grow. And one day they might be able to not be the underdog, but be the majority.